Have you ever wondered what a securely attached person feels once a breakup happens, specifically when they are in no contact with their ex? Well, if you're curious, we're going to cover in this video exactly what securely attached people tend to feel and do after a breakup. And you can either take from this and sort of implement some of these strategies into your own healing experience, or you can gain some certainty and closure and understanding by knowing what some of their process might be like if perhaps the person you were most recently dating is securely attached. So, first and foremost, securely attached individuals tend to have something really valuable that happens with them after a breakup. And it's that because they generally tend to be quite good at communicating their feelings and needs openly and transparently throughout the course of a relationship or throughout the course of dating somebody, they more easily arrive at a place of acceptance if a relationship doesn't work out. And it's almost like they fast track to that stage and sort of pass through other stages of grief more quickly. And the reason being is that if you were somebody who was constantly transparent, open, doing the healthiest thing that you possibly could, knowing how to communicate your needs, knowing how to communicate your feelings, by the time something doesn't work, it's almost like you know that you gave it your best shot. And so you have a greater sense of closure just within that knowing and understanding. Also, securely attached individuals are less likely to fall into limerence or to fall into codependent patterns. So they also have an easier time kind of maintaining the relationship to themselves in a foundational way while in a relationship, which again, they don't feel like they lose themselves in a relationship and then have no sense of self to discover post breakup, which also makes their healing process easier. So you'll see some of those major things, but if they actually have steps, there's sort of three things that they tend to do post the breakup, after already kind of landing in an acceptance phase. The first thing is that they will actually respect their feelings. So they won't try to push their feelings down. They won't judge themselves for having emotions. They'll understand that grief and feeling their feelings is a natural part of the healing process. And they may not necessarily, like, it doesn't mean all securely attached people psychologically and consciously are like, I am going to feel my feelings because that's healthy to do. But because of the way they were conditioned, they don't have negative emotional associations or limiting beliefs about what it means to feel their feelings. In other words, they're less likely to be in a position where they have been taught growing up to shame themselves for their feelings in any kind of way, meaning that they'll just naturally have a better relationship to their emotions. So they will feel their feelings. That allows them to process their feelings more quickly. And then what they will also do, number two here, is they will find closure if necessary. And what I mean by this is if there's anything left on the table that the securely attached person wishes they did say, and I don't mean when it comes to communicating their feelings and needs, like I was talking about, and as that relates to acceptance, I mean specifically like if during the breakup discussion they didn't feel like they said everything that was on their mind then, or didn't get a chance, maybe somebody broke up with them, they didn't get a chance to really share what their side was, they will give themselves the opportunity to gain closure. So what we'll see, for example, for like a fearful avoidant or a dismissive avoidant, for example, is if somebody breaks up with them, or there's just sort of like a breakup that happens, even if they're doing the breaking up, if they usually think of something after and they're like, I wish I clarified that, or it would give me closure if I had just done XYZ, but then they'll retract from that. They won't like try to have approach-oriented behaviors to then go gain the closure because they're scared of like being vulnerable. Securely attached people aren't worried about that. They're not worried about being vulnerable or being seen as weak. And so they will say what they need to get the closure that they need to move on more effectively. And they'll gift that to themselves. They'll honor that. Like if there's something on their mind, they'll say it. And I don't mean, to be really clear, that like they're saying this, that they're reaching out to their ex every time they think of something. And there's this like once a week period of time where they're reaching out to their ex. I mean that they'll take the time to summarize their thoughts, their feelings. And if something's kind of eating at them, they'll give themselves one time to get the closure that they need through, writing an email or sending a voice note or whatever it might be to just gain that closure. So they really give themselves permission to honor their feelings and needs first and what they need for healing, which again fast tracks their process. So we have one more thing to cover, but I just want to review so far because they show up, in their truth a lot more easily because they have less attachment wounds and fears of like sharing themselves. They communicate their feelings and needs much more effectively throughout the relationship, which allows them to reach acceptance more quickly if a relationship doesn't work out. Then They allow themselves to feel their feelings and better process their feelings. They allow themselves to say what they need to say or anything that's left on their mind to honor their need for closure and moving on. I will say, if you're somebody going through a breakup right now and really in the thick of it and in the sting of the breakup itself, please feel free to check out for 14 days for free our How to Heal from a Breakup course. It's made for dating, long-term relationships, marriages. Like, it's literally made to process a lot of the pain and suffering we feel and the grief that we feel after a breakup. Because when we're going through that, we can miss out on like working through stories that we have. Oh, I was never good enough. I'm unworthy of love. I'll be alone forever. As we clean up those stories, and there's tools in that course to help you do that, it takes a huge amount of the sting out of the relationship. And then we can also identify in that course our own personal points of grief. So if you're grieving about the unmet needs that you now have because your partner or loved one was meeting them, if you're grieving about the different traits that that person brought into your life, and now you have to go out and like, bring those traits into your life in a variety of different ways, it gives you steps and strategies to really work through those things so you can speed up the process of grieving and take a lot of that suffering out of it as immediately as possible. And the last thing here is, securely attached people know that they have to make an intentional effort to meet their needs. So part of what grief is, if you can imagine like for analogy's sake, if you can imagine like a bucket, and let's say that you had a partner pouring into the bucket. Okay. So let's say that they were filling a lot of your bucket with your needs. And then all of a sudden that person is gone out of your life. Well, grief is the void where these needs were being met. So what we have to be able to do is, even if it's uncomfortable, and you'll actually see it in like what your subconscious mind does on autopilot. Like, if you've watched this YouTube channel for a long time, you'll know, for example, that um, everything that the subconscious mind does is a strategy to get its needs met. And often when the subconscious is left to its own devices, it doesn't always have the best ways. So you'll see this in normal human behavior. Like, you'll see, for example, that when people go through a breakup, they may eat a lot of junk food and watch sad movies or romantic comedy movies. And part of this is because our subconscious associations to food, our first literal associations and programming about what food is when we're being breastfed. And there's a lot of oxytocin, which is the bonding neurochemical being produced during the breastfeeding process between parent and child. And so what's so funny is that you'll see like there's these subconscious emotional associations we have to food as being emotional connection, but also comfort and safety. Because you think about a child being breastfed, the child's being cradled, they're being held, they're safe. And so, you know, when somebody goes through breakup, sometimes people will rely on food to try to meet these needs. And other things is, trying to can reconnect to love through romantic comedy movies. And so it's interesting because the mind naturally does this, but that's not always the best way, right? So like, if you knew, for example, that you need to intentionally get your needs met for emotional connection, comfort, safety, love, you could go get that from friends, from family, from doing things intentionally to fill those voids in ways that are going to, if you imagine that big void, food and romantic comedy movies might just fill it up the tiniest bit. But if your conscious mind is online and can analyze this, it can go, okay, I've got a big void here. And you can go about getting these needs met in more direct ways through building friendships, meeting new people, spending time with loved ones, asking for care and connection and quality time from people that you love. And so that will heal the void much more quickly. And that's something securely attached people tend to do differently, is they tend to actually spend a good amount of time learning what their needs are and knowing how to action those out. Again, it's not necessarily as conscious of a process for a securely attached person. It's more subconscious, because a lot of the securely attached person's programming growing up is that they were taught to communicate their needs, action out their needs. They felt worthy and deserving of having their needs met because their caregivers met their needs consistently. And so their conditioning is that my needs matter. They deserve to be met, and I deserve to make space to initiate them. And so this is something securely attached people will do differently that will also help them heal from breakups much more quickly. So while they will experience different amounts of pain or suffering after a breakup, and they will experience loss and grief just like anybody else, they do tend to have a much faster bounce back period because of these different mechanisms happening at a subconscious level that allow them to move through the process with more, essentially more grace. Not saying that other attachment styles are like less graceful or something like that, but just because their programming is more gentle, right? Their programming is more gentle, more self-accepting. So they have more grace towards themselves during this process. And when other attachment styles don't have this, it doesn't make them any lesser than. It just means that they're in a position where they haven't been taught and modeled as healthy and proactive of behaviors that can support them. And so that's where, if you are another attachment style, you want to integrate some of these things and gift them to yourself so that you can also move through these things, these pain points of grief much more effectively. So that's it for today. If you have other questions, let me know. If you want to see more content on securely attached people, please hit the like button. I go now and I see in the back where people like the videos the most, and I'm taking that as like a voting system. And so I'll go in there and see, okay, lots of people want this kind of content. So please feel free to let me know, to share, and let me know questions or comments you have down below, and I'll take a look as well. So thank you for stopping by. Please consider liking, sharing, subscribing if you're enjoying this channel, and I can't wait to see you in future videos.